everyone, and welcome to today's session on changing the food system for the better. I'm delighted to be joined by some incredible experts today where we'll be discussing how we can change the food system for a healthier, better planet. So first up in today's session, I'll be talking to Arizona Muse. Arizona is a model environmental activist and founder of Dirt, a charity that supports and promotes biodynamic farming as a solution to the climate crisis. Arizona is passionate about sustainability and environmental regeneration and one of the fashion industry's leading voices on the topic. Welcome to the stage, Arizona. Thank you so much for joining me today. Can we just start by talking about Dirt and what the mission behind the organization is?
Yes, definitely. So happy to be here today with all of you, exploring all these amazing things downstairs. It's been so much fun. So Dirt is a foundation that I started last year, and I started Dirt because of my long journey in activism. So I'll start with a little introduction of how I got here. I'm a model, so not exactly the most likely person to be speaking at a ChangeNOW conference. And the reason I'm here is because I became an activist. I became an activist because I realized that even though I was in the center of the fashion industry as a model, working for brands that you've all heard the names of in high fashion for years, I didn't know enough about where these clothes were from, who made them, what is silk really? And I realized I needed to know these things, and it felt like my responsibility because I was helping to sell these clothes and thereby kind of have a responsibility to know and to educate about where they come from, and also to make decisions about what do I feel good about? Am I okay selling clothes that I now know are causing immense damage, both environmentally and on a humanitarian level as well? So I started learning. I started educating myself, and that was 7 years ago, and that looked like me sitting in my living room, reading books, watching documentaries, very solo, kind of lonesome existence. And whenever I would go to a fashion dinner, I would sit next to my seat partner and maybe start talking about what I was interested in, like sustainable materials maybe. And sure enough, I had about a minute and a half before they were like, that's boring, and would talk to the person on their other side. It wasn't cool then. And it's amazing to be here now and see how everyone thinks sustainability is cool. That has changed immensely in the last 7 years, and it's really, really encouraging to know that. So back to the beginning of the story, I started educating myself, and I kept finding that all these materials, all this fashion that we're wearing is grown for us in soil by farmers. But I had never stopped to say, "Thank you, farmer, for growing my dress for me. So nice of you." I wasn't making that link, that connection between agriculture and fashion. And now I do, because I realize that every single natural material that we wear, and even the metals that are on our zips and buttons and hardware everywhere, the metals are mined from soil. The materials are grown from soil. Polyesters and all the unnatural synthetic materials we need to move away from, because we can't be supporting that industry to make our clothes, and also they shed microfibers like crazy. It's just not ideal. So natural fibers that are grown by farmers who are supported to make good decisions about how they farm, to increase biodiversity, to increase water retention and absorption in soil, to feed the micro-life below the surface of the earth. Because soil, really long introduction, I'm so sorry.
I'm enjoying it, please carry on.
Soil, I used to think of it as like a blanket on top of the earth, and it was one thing, all connected, but one thing. And then the more I learned about soil, the more I realized, oh, it's trillions of tiny little things. It's trillions of tiny little things that all play together. They're all having babies and eating and pooping and having sex, and they're busy. They're busy, busy microorganisms, and we need to feed that life within the soil rather than kill it. And right now, all the agricultural chemicals that we use on farms, but also in forests and also in wild spaces are sprayed with chemicals in the name of pest control and getting non-native species of bugs out, basically. Sometimes airplanes go over forests and just spray them with chemicals. It kills so many things, including the life within the soil, that can then no longer support the life above soil. So I got kind of obsessed with soil. And I started a whole charity to support soil regeneration globally, because I truly saw and still see it's one of the most important things that we can do in the face of climate change.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It's a huge topic to undertake. How did you decide what kind of projects and areas to focus on within that umbrella?
I always try to look at things from the farmer's point of view. And I ask farmers, whenever I speak to them, which is now, thankfully, on a daily basis, what do you need? What can dirt do to support what you're already doing? That's already amazing. Because a lot of our system is not set up to support farmers. So they survive on subsidies from taxpayer money. So I know that right now my taxpayer money is going to buy chemicals to spray on soil, which makes no sense for me at all, but I have no control over that right now, other than just speaking out about it, which I'm doing. We need to change the pathways for our subsidies, and that doesn't mean taking subsidies away from farmers who are struggling. It means making sure that when farmers receive subsidies, those subsidies are designed to initiate change on their farm, on their land, and really support the farmers. Because I've met a lot of farmers, and I've never met one, nor will I ever, who actually wants to be causing harm to their land. Like, no one says, yay, I want to spray toxic chemicals all over my soil. No one. We're stuck in a system that not only enables that to happen, but requires it to happen. It's the way our system works. You buy chemicals, you buy genetically modified seed to withstand those chemicals, you spray the chemicals on up to 16 times a year. It's not just once. And whenever we buy anything that's from a farm, unless it's from a tiny farm that you know and speak to and ask, do you spray chemicals? And they say no. Or unless it's certified organic or biodynamic by Demeter or regenerative ROC in the US, which is a new standard, which is amazing, it will be sprayed with chemicals. This is a misunderstanding that needs to be unraveled, that because of amazing marketing and those nice little pictures on my milk cartons my entire life with the cow and the red barn, I've always imagined that farming is so sweet and pretty and cute, and like a few little cows make my milk for me. That is not the story. You Google factory farming and know that factory farming is not different than conventional farming. Conventional farming is the same thing as factory farming. They've been able to kind of disidentify with factory farming and say that, well, no one does factory farming. We don't do factory farming. And that is common in me too. You know, I used to, and so many of us do this, and it's okay. We think, oh no, but I would never buy from a factory farm. But the truth is, if you're buying food from a grocery store, or if you're buying fashion from a normal fashion brand that hasn't really paid attention to where they're sourcing from, you are buying things from factory farms that are using chemicals. So it's such an inherent problem right now, but it is solvable because it's only been a problem for the last 70 years. They didn't used to exist, these chemicals. They were invented after the Second World War, First World War, one of the world wars. And they didn't come into rampant use until about 40 years ago. So it's not an old problem, it's a new problem. So I think that I think it's safe to say that in a shorter amount of time than it took to start using all these chemicals, we could stop using all these chemicals. So this is why DIRT focuses on biodynamic farming. We have projects all over the world that are supporting biodynamic farmers to regenerate soil. And biodynamic farming is an incredible type of regenerative agriculture. Obviously, it uses no chemicals. Could you tell that I don't really like chemicals in agriculture? And it also regenerates soil by using composting. Composting is so underrated as a climate solution. If we were all composting all of our biodegradable material, we would be on another level of climate resilience. We really would, because so much waste is lost when it could be nutritive, but it's lost in a landfill because it's an anaerobic environment where it can't break down properly. If it goes into a compost, all those trillions of microorganisms I talked about are eating it, and it's food to them. So compost is like golden. We need to value it and put it into the right infrastructure, which doesn't exist in most places. So municipalities could be working on building a composting infrastructure. That would be really helpful. So we have amazing projects all over the world that do need funding. So if anyone's interested in funding soil regeneration, we can help you. And these farmers are people who are so intelligent, so observant. I feel so lucky to be able to know these people, to speak to them, be influenced by them, because I learn so much. And it's humbling, it's beautiful. I'm so positive about the future in spite of being a climate activist, because of seeing all the solutions all the time, seeing that there are people all over the globe who are climate resilient. And it's just so inspiring.
Thank you. In terms of consumer habits, so this session is on changing the food system, for example, what kind of actions, practical actions, consumers do in terms of how they're eating and also the things that they're buying, like you mentioned, fashion? What are some practical actions that we can take away?
Read the labels. Just do it every single time you buy anything. Read its label. I didn't used to, and I still sometimes don't understand the words that are on the label. Google them. You need to understand what they are. We need to know where these materials come from. Lyocell doesn't really indicate what it is, so you need to Google it to find out that it's made from trees, usually eucalyptus trees that are grown in a monoculture. So if you look at a forest, it's biodiverse. There are so many species of trees, bushes, grasses, tiny plants, big plants, small plants on all different levels growing together. This is what biodiversity looks like. Then you put the layer of the fauna in there too. All the birds, all the insects, so many different species living high up, middle, low down, under the ground. That is what healthy biodiversity looks like. When you have a monocrop, you can't have that, because a forest of only eucalyptus trees will only attract a specific kind of species of bird, and will only attract a specific species of insects, and they'll get overpopulated, their populations will balloon, then you'll have disease problems, and then people spray chemicals to stop all those problems. It might be fungicide, it might be pesticide. Monocrops are kind of the core of the problem, and if we could avoid monocrops and be growing everything in a biodiverse way, we would eliminate the need for any chemicals. And this is what biodynamic farming and loads of other ways of growing and managing land and caring for ecosystems are talking about.
I'd love to know, when you started this project and you started to talk more about climate activism, what was the response from people? So you said 7 years ago that, caring about the planet wasn't cool, and now it is, which is great. But what were people's responses to you starting this?
Very positive. I've been so lucky that I've been encouraged, supported, and it is an unknown space. I mean, we're all here sitting in this conference because we're changing the world. And it does feel heroic sometimes. And I invite and welcome everyone to just lean into that. You are heroes. What you're doing is heroic. It's amazing. We're all going to look back at the end of our lives and go, gosh, I'm so glad I was a part of all that. And I think that's the spirit that we need to share with each other, build each other up. There are so many solutions, and we need all of them, and we need everybody working together, supporting each other. Let's create a different culture than that of this system that we're moving away from, where people were bringing each other down. They were doing all kinds of negative behaviors and actions toward each other, toward themselves, negative thinking cycles and patterns. I've really been looking a lot into regenerative thinking. What is that? How can I change the way I think, the way I perceive things, my judgments? Am I judging things? When I judge things, am I less able to receive and absorb information? Probably. When I'm not being so judgmental, and when I'm truly curious from the bottom of my heart, am I able to absorb so much more and find so many more pathways through life and through the world? So all of this, I feel like, is some of the most important stuff that we're all doing and working on. And it sounds abstract, but go back a long time ago, before our modern society, to how humans lived, they were doing that. That was how they were living. So it's actually not that abstract. Maybe it's even our nature.
Do you think we're doing enough?
No. I don't think we're doing enough. I think in fashion, I hear a lot about step by step, one at a time. We're going in the right direction, and I find that conversation, that narrative, frustrating now, because it would have been an amazing approach had we started 45 years ago, but we didn't. So right now we need radical action. We need radical change. If you're someone who's lucky enough to have money in your pocket right now, you need to buy the more sustainable options that are more expensive. You do. It's your responsibility. If you don't have enough money in your pocket right now to make those choices, to have the luxury and the privilege of making those choices, please don't feel guilty. Let's not guilt people like that. That's the system. That's the system that is holding so many people in a place where they cannot make those decisions. It's deeply unjust and deeply unfair. So remember, when you're buying something and making a choice, do a little bit of research, spend a little time, and if you have it, spend the extra money on the thing that is better for the environment and people, because that business needs your purchase. That means everything to them. They get so excited when they gain one new customer. Like, that is changing the world, one little piece at a time. And greenwashing is everywhere. I don't have this one solution to greenwashing, but we all need to stop doing it. It's not okay. It's misguiding consumers. It's misguiding citizens. It's misguiding our children. That's not okay. Sometimes it happens by accident, just from undereducation of the people within a business, and sometimes it happens on purpose. Both ways are not okay. So we need to move away from that through education and through, hopefully, regulation. As well, as I said, I don't have the one answer, but putting that out there, no more greenwashing.
Fantastic, thank you. If you could have one takeaway for our audience today that is something that they could go away and do that would help support your vision for the future and the mission of your organization, what would that be?
So many things.
You can have two then.
Okay. Look for farmers. Look for local farms near you and contact them and see if you can start buying anything from them. That is really helpful to them. Really amazing. And also you'll build a relationship. I personally go and volunteer on biodynamic farms whenever I can, and I bring my children. Those days are my favorite days ever. Being out in nature, learning so much about the complexity of growing things, feeling so satisfied and satiated, knowing that I've participated in that. I receive so much more than I give, I feel like, on those days when I go and volunteer on these farms. It's life-changing. So that is what I would recommend. Find farms, buy things from them, and also go and spend your time with them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for talking to me today. It's been such an informative discussion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next up, I would like to invite onto the stage Leah and Cédric for our discussion. Might want to turn it slightly. There we go. So next up, we're going to be talking about changing our dietary habits for a healthier planet. I'm joined on stage by Leah Bajc, who is an impact-driven entrepreneur and investor that brings 2 decades of investing and operating experience. She's currently a partner at Blue Horizon, a sustainability-focused fund investing in the intersection of technology, biology, and agriculture. And Cédric Meston, who trained as an engineer and at Telecom Paris before completing a master's at Imperial College London. He is passionate about nature and sport and launched France's first plant-based meat food tech, HappyVore, in 2019. Thank you so much for joining me on stage. So first off, can we just start by talking about our dietary habits? Starting with you, Cédric, tell me a little bit, what do you think needs to change in terms of our dietary habits for a healthier planet?
First, thanks a lot for inviting us. So currently we eat way too much meat, actually 3 times more than our parents. And the reason why is that meat is currently underpriced due to intensive livestock. And for us at HappyVore, what we believe is that to reduce our meat consumption, first we should not change our dietary habits. And that's why we produce plant-based meat alternatives. So it's products that looks like meat, taste like meat, but are completely made from plants. And with this, we help people to keep their habits while keeping the good taste of meat and reduce the meat consumption.
Thank you so much. And I suppose just having been in Paris a few days, I can imagine that the challenge of getting French people to eat less meat is probably harder than it is in other cities. So are there any particular challenges you found with launching your business here?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we have 3 challenges. The first one is to produce good products that taste like meat. So it's a lot of research, it's a lot of innovation. Then the second one is to have products that are cheap enough. Currently, with intensive livestock, the price of meat is underpriced. So plant-based meat products are more expensive than meat, and it should not be. And the challenge we have is to find ways to produce meat alternatives that are cheaper than meat. Currently, we cannot do this, but we hope that we'll manage to do it on a long-term basis. And then the third one is to make people taste. A lot of people have a bad view of these products. So that's why we're here downstairs with the products to make them try and show them that you can enjoy plant-based meat food.
Thank you. Lei, you've been investing in the sustainability space for a number of years. What are some of the challenges that you've faced in launching businesses of this kind where you're trying to change consumer habits?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends of within transformation, the protein transformation. It is a little bit on the habits. There is, of course, we need to reach price, texture, taste parity, but also as a next stage, there needs to be nutritional value. And as we are exploring and pushing the boundaries, we can not only find solutions that are equally good, but actually far, far better for us, far superior from nutritional perspective, because a lot of us today are, over-colorized but undernourished, right? And that's going to be the next wave that helps that as well. But there is a lot, to Arizona's point, to your point, there is a lot of education that needs to help. People are just not aware. Right, so we need to help people understand what is actually going on and what this is doing to our planet, to the animals, to ourselves.
In terms of how we're eating, do you think that shift is happening with people just wanting those plant-based alternatives?
Actually, in France, we definitely see it right now. We started the businesses in 2019. And actually, at this time, it was very complicated to convince people to try plant-based meat products. With the COVID, a lot of people understood that meat is responsible for a lot of carbon emissions. And right now, we see a very good acceleration. It started in 2021, and today, in 2022, we see a very, very high acceleration in eating plant-based meat products.
Yeah, absolutely. I would echo that. I mean, you can see with the successes of Beyonds and Impossibles and so on, the world has really seen what we have shown is there is a massive amount of demand for this type of products. And we like to call those early products kind of an iPhone 5, if we're generous. We see kind of the iPhone 8s and beyond now, and what's going to come is, it's really, really exciting developments on this side. So COVID, again, has put further emphasis on people wanting to eat healthy and starting to research, so there's been a surge. But really, when you think about it, we are finding ourselves at intersection of quite a few paradigm shifts, right? We have, of course, the environmental imperative. Consumer preferences are changing. We have the regulatory, but also now, and especially with what's been happening this year in the world, there is also a question of food security. Right, what's going to happen to that? Like, our climate and climate change might be affecting crops and other things. How are we going to feed everyone, right? And to me, we are in a really exciting time we live in, which has an unfathomable change on us as a Homo sapiens, which is historically you could grow food where conditions were perfect, the right amount of sun, the right amount of water, all these different things, and then you had to bring it to wherever the demand was. Supply, demand were opposite. in not so distant future, we'll be able to grow food where demand is. And that shifts everything for us. So I couldn't be more excited to be working in this space.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the other businesses in this space that kind of excite you when you're investing? What do you look for in an exciting sustainability investment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, we are an impact fund, right? And fixing the food system, as we call our kind of investment thesis, is new sustainable food systems. It's critical to getting us to net zero, right? So food is the second largest greenhouse gas emitter after energy, and it's quickly becoming number one because we are solving a lot of the issues with energy. So big impact is absolutely number one. We look at everything from sustainable food to sustainable production through emerging biotechnology. So it can also be things and the infrastructure, because the industry started, call it 2015, 2016, depending on who you ask, and show that there is demand. But now there is a sufficient amount of demand, sufficient amount of players to start warrant more infrastructure players, the picks and shovels of the industry, to enable really this transition. And when we look at investments, we look at like, what are the bottlenecks? We really, really deeply care that the transition happens. So we look 2-3 years out, and we look at like, where will be the bottlenecks if things are continuing, and we try to place our investments there because to enable the transition to happen smoothly and try to be as forward-looking as possible.
Thank you. Cédric, tell me a little bit about investment for your business. How important has that been, and how did it change the business?
Well, actually, in plant-based meat, it's necessary to raise funds for several reasons. The first one is to build products. You have first research, and research is patents. It takes a lot of time and investments. Then, for the production, you need funds to have a big enough plant to have good prices. And finally, you need to convince people to try the products. And for this, you need to do a lot of degustations. You need to do a lot of marketing events. You need to do a lot of communication. And this means that you must invest a lot in the first years before creating money. So that's why you need investments during the first maybe 5 years.
If you could go back to the start of your business journey and kind of tell yourself some advice of things you wish you'd known, is there anything that you would say?
Well, for me, what's the most important thing is to make people try the products, even if they're not good enough. At the beginning and for the first day of research, what we've done is each time we had a good product, we made it try to several people, both consumers on the streets, and both chefs, Michelin chef in France. And all the tasting we've done was so important to understand how we could improve the products that we've always continued, and even now we're doing hundreds of tasting every year to develop the new products.
Leo, you must see so many companies in your line of work, and you mentioned about impact. How do you actually measure impact for a business that you're investing in?
Yeah, that is a question. We actually take this extremely seriously, and we have an incredible woman who helps do this for us, Holt Sedef, who also developed the impact framework for Generational Agors Fund. And we measure impact and ESG separately. So impact is, okay, this product succeeds. What's going to be the impact it has on this world, like based on like what they're replacing and so on. And then ESG is the business practices. You know, both need to be there. So you can, if you have a lot of impact but questionable practices, it's not going to fly. And then within impact, we look at animal health, planetary health, human health, right? And not every company will fit into all the buckets, right? It depends what the company does, but you can never have any red flags. But for those of you who are familiar with investing, you know, when you start looking at a company, you first kind of do, you know, the sniff test, and then you look at the numbers, does this make sense? And, you know, the further down you go in due diligence, the more specific and accurate numbers you get on return risk and so on. Well, we do the same on impact. So we get it down to both qualitative and quantitative, because we want to ground it in a number and we want to hold ourselves accountable. So we are really pushing the envelope on this. We're improving every day, and we welcome input, but there needs to become a standard on how to do this to avoid all the impact washing, greenwashing, and everything else that's happening.
Impact washing is not a phrase I've heard before, but it's a good one. What are some common mistakes that you see with startups in this space, of things that they try to achieve, and maybe common pitfalls that occur?
I think it really depends a bit on the stage of the company, right? Initially, it's very much about getting the product, the team, and the market. But then later on, it's going to be much more around scaling. And to your point, these are companies that ultimately get a product into people's hands. Right, so you will need steel in the ground, you will need this, you will need that, you will need distribution. So the capital expenditures will be meaningful. So really think through that, having the right partners, think how you're going to stage it and scale it to make sure that premature scaling is the #1 cause why companies fail. Right, so really thinking through these steps very, very carefully is critical to make sure you can become one of the household names of the future.
Cédric, have there been any challenges with your business in terms of scaling?
Well, the first one we had with PlantBased Meat in France is that the difference in the French food market with a lot of the other ones is on the health parts. French people are very, let's say, attending on the health issues. So we had to develop products that are good both in taste and in health, so low saturated fats, limited list of ingredients. And this was quite a big challenge compared to a lot of our competitors. And then the second challenge we had were on scaling. Producing, let's say, 10 kilos a day is quite easy. But then when you need to move to 10 tons a day, it's completely different challenges. It's different ways of producing also the meat alternatives. And that was a second complicated part of the challenge of the business. And then third one on scaling was the distribution. So convincing clients to put the product in stores while we don't know if people will buy them. And then convince people in the end to buy and rebuy, repurchase the products. And this is definitely done with degustation. Now in France, each time we open a store, we organize a degustation to make sure that people try it. And once they've tried, we know that the repurchase rate is high and they will buy again and it will move.
So actually every step of the way there are challenges. So you mentioned one of the challenges being getting people to try it for the first time and changing that habits. Do you have any tips or advice of how you actually successfully managed to get people to try it and to love it?
Well, the most easiest thing is what we do downstairs is just to cook products, and with the smell, people try, they say they like it, and then more people come, and so you should all come to our stand just below to try the products after this pitch.
Thank you. Leah, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the companies that you've invested in that are doing really exciting things that you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I'll give you a few examples, and just to see sort of the breadth of what actually the industry is. So one company we invested in that's super exciting is called AgBiome, and it's sustainable crop protection. Right, so of course the pesticides we put on the crops, they're terrible for the farmers, for biodiversity, for us. Consumers don't really properly wash the fruits and veggies either, and on top of that, they're becoming non-economical because the plants are creating resistance. Right, so this company has created, we call it the world's largest bug database, not the computer type, and has a biological alternative. And what's super exciting about them is not only is it of course far better for us, but it also extends shelf life, which has been the problem a lot with organic alternatives, because by the time you come to the store, they're barely edible anymore. So already sort of live in the US and growing, really, really exciting. Then another one is, of course, called Motive. It has ingredients that are critical for taste, texture, nutrition for plant-based alternatives. So if you think of like a plant-based cheese, so you get it like that gooey, stretchy things like that, that can enable all of us to have, better products, tastier products, better, and getting us closer to that taste, texture, nutrition sweet spot we want.
That sounds very nice. It's also really made me want cheese now you've said that. I think I'm going to get a cheese toastie afterwards.
It's getting close to lunchtime.
Cédric, as an entrepreneur in this space, what kind of qualities do you think you need to be a successful entrepreneur in the kind of the future of the food system space? Any advice you can share on that?
Well, I think it all goes back to the product, to having good products. That's what's well. If you're good in marketing, if you're good in the press, people will taste the product. But what's at the end, at the bottom line, what's important is that people purchase it again and again. And so this all gets back to the product, just having a delicious product that people enjoy and will want to take several times a week.
I mean, and there needs to be something that's, aspirational. It shouldn't be, to again Arizona's point, like it's not guilt that's gonna, get us to change. It needs to be a really good product, something tasty and something I choose because I want to, not because I feel I should. Right. So, and I think a lot of the products now and that are coming are really, getting that right.
Are there any kind of common values that you see in the entrepreneurs that you work with and invest in? Anything that you've noticed that kind of drives them?
Yeah, no. I mean, for sure. Like all the companies we work with, there is a huge alignment on the mission. There is, we call it the mission lock, and in fact, the fact that we have such well-developed impact framework, that has been a huge value driver for us, because then we work with the entrepreneurs because they want to also figure out a way to communicate that. You communicate that, to attract investors, to attract better talent, et cetera, but how do we get there? So that has been something that really has stood out for us and we look for in the entrepreneurs we work with.
And I suppose also that clarity of mission, of being very clear about what it is you're trying to achieve. Cédric, if you were to talk about the mission of you and your business, what would you say that is?
It will be to produce delicious meat alternative to convince people to reduce their meat consumption with tasty and healthy products.
Okay. What would you say the mission of your work is?
Well, to enable transition to new sustainable food systems, right? It's 10 minutes past midnight, so we need to do something.
Do you think that the change is happening quick enough in terms of how we're eating and our dietary habits?
I think we are reaching an inflection point, right? It kind of started slowly. The products were proven out. There was absolutely a demand, and now we kind of see that surge happening. And in fact, we've done a big report together with Boston Consulting Group called Food for Thought. And if the protein transformation happens as predicted by 2030, it will reduce as much as emission as getting majority of the aviation industry decarbonized. So the impact is huge because, if cattle were a country, it would be the third largest by greenhouse gas, by emissions standard. So, it's happening and we see this, we think we are kind of at this inflection point where more and more people, I mean, just look at the size of this conference and change from year to year.
Do you think that the change is happening quick enough in the food system?
Well, I think it could happen faster. But that's I think for especially in France, what's limited for the startup to grow is the size of the market. And at the beginning, 3 years ago, we were the first one to invest in communication to try to convince people to try the product. So it was quite complicated first. Now we are several startups in the French food markets, so it starts to be much better, and we see a lot of acceleration. And I definitely agree with what you say. I think we're at an inflection point, and that 2022 will be a great year for plant-based food.
It must have also become a pretty competitive space in the plant-based foods for your company.
Well, I think it's quite positive to be in a competitive environment. First of all, it pushes you to have better and better products. Then the second thing is that people don't eat the same products each day, so you need to have several alternatives to convince people to really get to have the habit of eating plant-based food. And then the last one is that we are several ones to do communication, to do tasting. So overall, it's very positive for the market.
And look, the market is growing. We are at about 2% penetration right now. We expect to be sort of base case 22% by 2035. That's 10x growth. There is room. There's plenty of room, for amazing companies to come in and really change what we eat and ultimately who we are.
Do you think the appetite, for want of a better word, is much higher now for investing in these kind of sustainable companies? Are investors a lot more excited about them?
There's been a lot of new investment firms that have been created with this type of focus because we've seen that there is demand. And, there's also, the time is right. Timing is perfect, like partially from technological perspective, whether it's computing power, whether it's this, whether it's that. When you look at cost curves, right? In technology, it kind of started pretty expensive and went down. And you look at biotech, kind of follow a relatively similar looking curve, and we are seeing the same thing here. So like a lot of the factors are coming together that make this, the time is now, and it's going to happen, and great companies are going to be created in the next decade plus.
And I suppose from the investment side, also interested in the impacts, not just the kind of financial benefits, but the impact.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that impact and returns kind of were at odds with each other. It's like, oh, this is a charity, and with the new generation, with the focus, with a little bit the wake up call, it's not even going to be nice to have. It's going to be a need to have, because consumers are just not gonna buy without it. And in fact, we did a report with MSCI. And calculated that companies that are not in the 1.5 degrees case, companies that are not part of the transformation have about 300 billion at risk, right? So their market caps and other things are going to get hammered if they don't do something about this, because they're just going to fall behind.
Very interesting. So just as a final takeaway for our audience members today, the session was around changing our dietary habits for a better planet. If you were to give a takeaway of things that we can do to change our dietary habits for a better planet, what would that be?
Well, definitely to reduce your meat consumption. I think it's really key today. And to do this, you have now you start to have amazing products, not just HappyVore products, but a lot of very good products that you can find in stores, you can find in restaurants. So I would encourage you to go and try at least once to get a point of view on this kind of new products, and then if you enjoy it, to come again.
What's your favorite product that you create?
I think it's our nuggets. We have plant-based nuggets that are quite amazing.
So it's like a chicken nugget, but
exactly, it's better than a chicken nugget.
Okay, I'm going to try one later.
But so you should go and try. You can try just below.
I did smell them earlier being wafting. If you were to give one kind of takeaway for our audience on eating for a better planet,
I mean, no question, shift to plant-based. It's very sort of. I mean, it's huge impact, more than you might think, and it adds up. But I also think, like, I consider myself a planetarian, for lack of a better word. So, like, just do better choices. Like, if you have a choice of traveling with the train or plane, take the train. For clothing, buy secondhand. Like, worry about where it comes from. There are, like, all these other things you can also be doing, but unquestionably, change to plant-based at least a couple of times a week. And you'll see, actually, when you start feeling better, you might increase that proportion.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for your time today and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Next up, I would like to welcome Guillaume Debrosse onto the stage for our fireside conversation. Hello. Yes, we'll take this one. How are you? It's quite hot on stage. Guillaume Debrosse is a graduate of Paris Dauphine University. He began his career at L'Oréal and then worked in Singapore as finance director of O2 British Telecom. He became CEO of the Bonduelle Group in 2018 to pursue its development. He leads strategic projects that are linked to his values, accelerating the company's transformation towards a B Corp certification and creating a new leadership model. Thank you so much for joining me on stage today. Can you tell me a little bit about the mission of your company?
Sure. First of all, I'm very happy to be here. I was very surprised to see the connections that we can have between the food industry and the fashion industry on soul regeneration. So thank you, Arizona, for have brought so many people in the audience. I'm sure it's a bit more attractive. Our mission of the company is quite simple. It comes from, I would say, the root of what we are doing. We are a natively plant-based company. And we have enlarged our ambition to all the plant-based because we were doing vegetables in the first place. And in 2012, with the family of the shareholders and the people in the company, we've decided to really embrace the food transition toward a plant-based food. And so our mission is really to inspire this food transition in order to contribute to human well-being as well as to the preservation of the planet.
Thank you. So the world is facing so many crises at the moment, causing instability, especially in food. How is the work of your company linked to those global challenges that the world is facing?
Well, we are at the crossroad of the food transition and the agriculture transition. So we are actually working on both. First of all, on the food transition, our goal is to really, I think, inspire all the flexitarians in the world. And we know that today in France, it's about 1/3 of the people who are consciously or unconsciously flexitarian. So that means they have reduced their consumption of animal protein. But we know that this flexitarian proportion is going to increase dramatically in the future. It's going to reach 50% in 2030 and maybe 75% in 2050. So our first mission is really to inspire them to make sure that whenever you move to plant-based, that you will have a good and positive impact on your health, but as well as the planet. And the second action that we have is to really accompany the farmers into this agriculture transition. And we are committed to the regenerative agriculture because we think that this is the best holistic approach to embrace all the challenges that the agriculture is facing. This is about water management, biodiversity, preservation of the soil, green gas emission, reduction of intrants, all these kind of issues that are today environmentally, I would say, not sustainable. So we have to work on both sides.
When we talk about resilience, can you tell me a little bit about your definition of food resilience and what you're doing for local food resilience?
Well, the first thing is when we talk about resilience is to trying to build ecosystems that are as much local as possible. We consider ourselves as a multi-local company because in fact, when you look at where we operate, we usually take the vegetables from the field, few minutes or hours from the field to the transformation area, and then we distribute to local consumption areas. So we have around 20 different regions where we operate in the world. So first of all is local. Then it's to make sure that when we work with farmers, they embrace as much as possible this idea or consumption of regenerative agriculture, which works, as I said before, on all the different dimensions. And these dimensions are helping to preserve the ecosystem sustainably. I think that's the two main ideas that we have to make sure that we build resilient food systems. But then I would say the last part is really, I think, to help the consumers and the chef in their journey in terms of moving more and more towards plant-based food.
So when it comes to changing to a more resilient food system, what do you think needs to change and what are the most important things within that?
I think we said it before with the HappyVore, for instance, or is to change or evolve our food behaviors. So, but I think right now we are lucky enough to be in many markets where we are pushed by a strong tailwinds, because I think a majority of consumers want local, convenient, healthy, responsible food. And these behaviors are changing rapidly, and I think what we can do is changing and accelerating that change by also making sure that, for instance, through our Louis Bonduelle Foundation, that we build programs to bring knowledge, education to young people to understand what are the benefits of eating plant-based food. This Louis Bonduelle Foundation also acts on the scientific way in order to promote and support PhDs that are working on these food behaviors. One good example, and I was really amazed by that a few years ago, with a PhD person who actually demonstrated that it's around 5 to 6 years old that you're starting to bring structural habits when you choose your food that you will last for all your life. So if at 5 years old you are accustomed to eat vegetables and you are developing taste and appetite for that, you will keep that for all your life. So how do you bring that, for instance, in schools, in canteens, to make sure that you bring plates that are attractive to young people in order for them then to develop, I would say, positive and beneficial food habits?
You mentioned that in most markets there's been a kind of strong demand from the consumer for these kind of foods. Are there any markets that you're finding more challenging and less responsive to it?
Sure, and when you look at the flexitarian world, in fact, we see that it's quite a complex world, because first of all, as I said before, you have unconscious flexitarians and conscious flexitarian, I would say elevated flexitarian, who understand and eat and want to compensate their daily intake with more plant-based protein, for instance, and they develop a very, I would say, sophisticated approach when they eat. When you are an unconscious flexitarian, you don't even know that you are gradually moving from animal protein to plant-based food. But I think the clusters that we see are also different from one continent to the other, or from one market to the other. In North America, for instance, people are more, I would say, technically savvy. They are more into the nutrition demand. So they really think about nutritional intake, as opposed to, for instance, the northern part of Europe, where they are very open to culinary experiences, to eat different types of food coming from all over the world, as opposed to France, where we are more traditionalist, Mediterranean diet. So you can see different kind of, I would say, culinary culture that brings different challenges, but also opportunities in terms of addressing these needs.
Thank you so much. Can you tell me a little bit more about Inspire, your sustainable growth with impact project?
Yeah, being in a company that's been lasting for 174 years brings you a lot of responsibility. And I would say I am extremely grateful for my predecessors, because they have built strong pillars to develop a company that has in its roots the wish to be a responsible company. It started a long time ago with the Bonduelle family, and they said at the very beginning of the, I would say, entrepreneurial adventure, that they want to have a project that is based on people. We have enlarged that to sustainability or responsibility that embraces people as well as the planet. Now, the challenge that I have, my generation, is the 6th generation, is to put that in the center of our business model. And so, therefore, our Inspire strategy is really based on these two legs: sustainable growth with positive impact. So when we say sustainable growth, this is about plant-based food, this is about our own brands, this is about multi-channel. And when we speak about positive impact, this is about the 3 pillars that we have in our positive impact strategy, which are embedded in our business model: food, planet, and people. And that's a real challenge to put that in the center of the business model. But if our generation here doesn't do it, who's going to do it? I think it's going to be too late. So I feel that it is a privilege, an honor, but a big responsibility to make that happen in the company and also to influence as many stakeholders as possible.
How did you decide on those 3 pillars? Why were those the important ones to the mission?
Well, obviously, being on the food industry with a strong impact in agriculture, we cannot avoid to have I would say, holistic approach on that. So on the planet side, it's very simple. It's regenerative agriculture. It's reducing our carbon footprint and to target for neutrality in 2050. And I saw a lot of very interesting initiatives here to help us to do that with, for instance, digital solutions. And the last part is on the packaging. We already have 95% of our packaging which is already recycled or designed to be recycled. We have 5% left, and it's quite demanding. And on the other aspect, so this is the planet part, is the food part. And the food part is really about simple things, such as being Nutri-Score A and B for our products that we deliver. And we are already at 96% of our branded products with Nutri-Score A and B with clean label. But we want to go further. We want to have much more impactful food by having positive impact brands. That means that brands that are engaged not only for the intake, what's inside, but with the packaging, with what we do with the farmers, with what we do with all the stakeholders.
As a business, how do you stay accountable to those goals, and how transparent are you about where you're at with the mission?
Well, we are, first of all, a listed company, so when we make commitments, we have to report. But I think my responsibility is to report to all the stakeholders that we are, I would say, engaging in our journey. And we don't want it to be exclusive. We are engaging with farmers, with consumers, with NGOs, with universities, with media, all of these ones. So we take commitments for the long term and we measure them. I don't like the idea of, just making commitments. We want proofs. We want to make sure that every year we bring tangible proof of what we are doing. So this is what we are doing on all the dimensions. It's a very challenging journey because being a 174-year company, we also have a legacy. We also have an heritage that we are bringing with ourselves. It's not like a startup where we have digital native brands and we start from scratch. We're all ticking the boxes. So we bring also all the agriculture world that needs time to bring solutions. So that's the challenge, because we are dealing with the long term for the agriculture world who are requesting long-term solutions. And in the same time, we are dealing with consumers, we are dealing with political expectations that are very short-term. So we are the crossroad of that, and we need to manage this tension. But we do report that, and for the first time this year, we have reported what we call an integrated report, which allows us to measure our global performance, not only the financial performance, but the non-financial performance. For instance, on the safety at work, on regenerative agriculture, on packaging, on consumption of water, as well as our EBITDA, CapEx, return on investment. So when you look at this report, you see how Bonduelle performs globally. And we want to do that now for the coming years to make sure that we have a global evaluation of our performance.
Fantastic, thank you. You mentioned before working with chefs on plant-based innovations. Can you tell me a little bit more about the work that you're doing there and training them?
Sure. We do operate a lot in retail, but a big part of our business is also in what we call food service, social restoration as well as commercial restoration. And more and more we see chefs that are requesting to get advice on how to basically cook plant-based food, how to put in their menu attractive, tasty I would say, sexy plant-based food. And they've been trained to cook fish and meat, but not so much about plant-based food. So with our culinary advisor, we have many culinary advisors, we are developing a range of services and products to help them to cook that. So this is with, obviously, recipes. This is also to tell them about what are the big trends that are happening in the world, in the world of food, in the world of restoration. What are the nutritional advice that we need to bring them to in order to build menu that are complete, nutritionally rich, and not just, you know, side dish. And we are bringing them also, I would say, inspiration with products and services. So right now we have 7,000 chefs that we have trained. Some of them are Michelin star chefs. And we've seen that, and we are enlarging that. We've been operating this greenology. We have called that service greenology. And I like the term because it reflects on enology with wine, because this is a very complex, very inspiring, and very exciting world. So we're trying to bring this greenology in France, and now we're expanding it to Spain and soon to Italy.
What are some of the innovations that you've launched in this line of work?
Well, we have a very interesting innovation that we launched recently. I don't know if you know the Casse-Grain brand. It's a very culinary brand with the little rabbit that is bringing magic and inspiration. So we have just launched a range of frozen, I would say, complete meals. Des parmentiers de légumes, des gratins, but all these products are meant to be complete. So they can be a center of the plate, a core meal. You don't need to add other side dish to make it complete. So they are on the shelf right now in France. We also have, under the Bonduelle brand, what we call lunch bowls. Exactly the same principle. It's a different technology. It's in a dye pack. It's a mix of cereal, vegetables, and grains. And you have all the types of consumptions that you need to bring a core meal for your intake at lunchtime. This is one portion, very convenient for when you are in a hurry, when you are alone, when you want to have a convenient solution. These are two examples very recently launched in Europe that we have developed. But I can, you know, talk a lot about the zero pesticide, or in the fresh industry, we have now renovated recipes with taboulé. Taboulé is a very simple product, and especially good for springtime when you need on-the-go fresh solutions.
How did the pandemic affect kind of consumer habits in terms of dietary? What were the changes that you saw during that time and post-pandemic now?
Well, the big change is obviously the dramatic drop of the food service, which has developed the at-home consumption. So people at home, when they were working in front of their computers, they didn't really have time to cook, to prepare all the food. So we need to address that, to come with some convenient, ready-to-eat solutions. But they also, in the same time, some of them had more time to prepare. So we also brought some meal kit solution in order for them to prepare something based on natural, fresh, and almost already prepared solution in order for them to cook them. But I think what it is interesting with this COVID, it has also put in the forefront the need for local solutions. And interestingly enough, the organic food has not been the first, I would say, expectation of consumers. You could have thought that organic was a big driver of that. Organic became maybe third or fourth in terms of expectations. Local was really the first driver of consumption. And the beauty, I think, of plant-based food, and especially in our business, is, as I said before, it's a very local food, because you cannot bring vegetables from the other part of the world if you want to transform them, or if you want to bring them fresh in the plate.
In terms of kind of barriers to people incorporating more plant-based food into their diet, what are some of the biggest barriers that you see, and what are you doing to try and overcome them?
Well, we talked about prices before, especially when you talk about animal protein substitutes. We are not so much in that, but we are not against it. I think there is this preconceived idea that plant-based food is more expensive. It is true in many aspects, but I think it's possible to provide very affordable products. So I think one of the barriers is to accept to pay sometimes a little bit more, because making good food, sustainable food, local food, clean label food, sometimes organic with no residue of pesticide, is actually costing more. So we have to accept to pay a little bit more for that, but also to have an ecosystem where each stakeholder in this system is paid, I would say, rightfully and fairly. And our duty as a food company is to make sure that the grower takes the fair share of that value chain. And so this is the first, I would say, barrier that we need to overcome. The second one is when you talk about vegetables, we have this idea that is not very tasty. But I can say that the variety of vegetables and plant-based food now that we have available in all the supermarkets allows us to have a variety of recipes, of culinary experience, of indulgence that I think provides many solutions to overcome that barrier.
Do you think that the challenge that you mentioned there about the cost and us accepting that it might cost more to have these plant-based foods, do you think that's at odds with the cost of living increasing, and perhaps that's a challenge for people at the moment?
It's clearly a challenge, but when you look at alternatives, and when we talk about meat, the alternative of meat, it's a lot more expensive food. So actually, when you look at a balanced diet, going toward plant-based food, even if you accept to pay more because it has a lot of, I would say, beneficial ingredients in it, it's still far more affordable than sometimes fish, meat, or even other types of fruits that you bring from the other side of the planet, or other types of ingredients that you bring from the other parts of the planet. So overall, I think even if it's more complex, sometimes contradictory with our preconceived ideas, plant-based food, I think, can be affordable.
Thank you so much. For your vision of the future and what change you'd really like to see come about, is there something in particular that really excites you or inspires you about the work you're doing in this space?
Well, what inspires me is what I saw today, for instance, in this conference, because you can see that when you look at the revolution that we are facing, the food and agriculture revolution, it is not all about farmers and I would say food companies like us and consumers. This is about all this ecosystemic approach. And we see a lot of initiative bringing a lot of innovation in terms of helping us to tackle all these big challenges, whether they are in the food and agriculture side, whether they are in the technology and digital side. And all these innovations are bringing, I think, very down-to-earth, immediate solutions to help us in this transition. And this is the beauty of it. We're talking about digital solution, for instance, to allow us to, for instance, tackle the carbon footprint that we want to improve. It could be about robotics when we talk about helping farmers to grow their field by picking the mauvaise herbe. I don't know what to say that in English, but the bad grass that are technically allowing us to consume less carbon, for instance, as well as innovation with, for instance, packaging that can allow us to to prolong the shelf life of products and bring the taste and protect the taste, for instance. So many innovations allow us, I think, to accelerate these transitions. This is what exciting me, and this is what I think brings this business into a very inspiring future.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. A lovely, inspiring note to end on. Guillaume, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So this is the end of today's session. We're going to have a short break now, and then a new session will be on the stage.